Remixers, thank you all so much for being here with us on this good day. Please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, support us, blackpowermedia.org, patreon.com/blackpowermedia. Come out. I sent you another story. If you could check your email, because there was, and this is from Infinite Content. Thank you, Infinite Content. The Post, Washington Post, that is, was covering the settlement reached with some Black Lives Matter activists out in Denver, a multi-million-dollar settlement for the harsh treatment they received from police during the summer of 2020, I believe. You got that up, Camus?
I got that up right now. 4.7 million.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I don't. Can you read it? Because I don't know how that gets divvied up. but let me not be pocket watching and counting how people spend their money. But
Denver to pay Denver to pay 4.7 million over claims curfew targeted George Floyd protesters. Black Lives Matter demonstrators who faced arrests and detentions while protesting the murder of George Floyd in 2020 have won a $4.7 million settlement from Denver. The Denver City Council approved the settlement of a class action lawsuit that alleged that hundreds of BLM protesters were unfairly arrested for violating the city's nighttime curfew between May 30th and June 5th of 2020. The legal team representing the plaintiffs, Lovey and Lovey, said in a statement on social media, the plaintiffs argued that the city's curfew and subsequent arrests targeted BLM protesters, violating their First and 14th Amendment rights. The majority of the protesters were detained for up to 2 days at the height of the coronavirus pandemic. The firm said many of the protesters faced serious hardships due to their detention, such as lack of medical care for injuries or medical condition, nearly being fired due to missing work, and even suicide attempts, the law firm added. Court documents show that the defendants, the city and county of Denver, agreed to settle given the uncertainty and risk associated with a jury trial. Further defense, the city said, would be burdensome and expensive, according to the documents. And further, the city still denies its curfew order was unconstitutionally enforced, the city attorney's office said in an email statement.
Then why did y'all pay the money?
I have a question though. Is it like a Black Lives Matter chapter, or are they just calling anyone who protested a Black Lives Matter protester?
My assumption is that it's going to be anyone who was arrested during that time period are the real plaintiffs, in terms of those who suffered injury and who the money would be divvied out to. So that would be, without sort of seeing the complaint itself, that the reason why the amount was so much is because it's going to be divvied out over, literally based on the article, hundreds of people who were arrested. And it might have been some calculation as to each person we get $20,000 each for their amount spent in jail or something on those lines. But there could also be, at many times in these cases, there are organizational representatives that get that become named plaintiffs in these lawsuits. And so there's also a possibility that the Denver chapter of Black Lives Matter, if it still exists, if it was incorporated and has a legal status, could also receive part of the settlement. But we just have to look at the actual complaint to see who the plaintiffs were and what was written out in the settlement itself.
But for the Black Lives Matter phrase and subsequent formation of the organization, the media, I don't know how the media would describe protesters, who get out in the streets against police violence and police brutality. I guess they would go back to calling them rioters. I'm not sure, but I feel like the media is very grateful that the phrase and the organization Black Lives Matter exists, because it, like you said, Ricky, it's sort of easy to umbrella everybody that was in the streets for those reasons, I suppose, to under the same, moniker, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I go back, when folks called me a Black Lives Matter protester or whatever, yeah, there's a little bit of like a chill that runs up my spine. It's like, I'm not in Black Lives Matter. BLM for me has always been Black Liberation Movement.
Right.
Which is not to say that, these days there are people in the formation that I relate to, talk to, organize with, in terms of its current iteration. But, again, I mean, we've had that larger conversation, but there's a larger conversation around not only the media, not only obviously the group itself, and what I think you alluded to this earlier, Ricky, in terms of some of the things that came out good, that in some ways the larger umbrella of the term being used, has uplifted our movement, or giving it more attention, or politicizing people in certain ways. But also there's that negative way in which everything gets swept under that, is put under that umbrella. And you're right, how the media, no matter what you do these days, if you're particularly if they see one black person, it doesn't have to be the majority of black people, but if they see one black person in the protest, they immediately go to the trope of like Black Lives Matter protest against police violence kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I try not to get offended when people do it, like, oh, you're a Black Lives Matter person. No, first of all, not a protester. I'm an organizer. That's different. That's but I try not to get offended, because there are Black Lives Matter chapters that have never been what the global organization became, and had to distance themselves from these people, and are just as radical as they
Shout out to Tony.
we know them to be. So I don't want to get offended and defend them, but I mean, we can't get away from the fact that those folks really damaged that whole. They damaged the phrase, I guess, that for lack of a better way of saying it, and we're always going to have to be kind of on the defense about that in a way.